Hi again, boys.
Hey, how are you?
I'm
G'day,
well.
guys.
Uh,
Howdy.
well, today we're looking at 1974 again, as we did last week. We looked at the singles of 1974 and counted down our top five. Today we're looking at the albums of 1974. And once again, we'll be counting down our top five albums. Martin, did you want to start off? Number five.
I'm going to go number five. Bit of an obscure one, maybe. Famous guitar player, if you're into guitar players, Robin Trower with Bridge of Sighs. And very Hendrixy, but something of his own flavour. But it was kind of like he dug a particular trench with that phasey thing going on with the guitar, just that whooshy sound. And he stayed in that trench for for the rest of his career, decades really. Um, Very interesting record. Robin Trower, Bridge of Sighs.
Cool. What about you, Wes? How are you?
Good. I'm going for an album by John Lennon called Walls and Bridges. It's the fifth solo project from him, and the set included a couple of singles, Whatever Gets You Through the Night and Number 9 Dream. The album comes between Mind Games and Rock and Roll. And for me, it's John's most interesting solo project, and especially with the elaborate arrangements. And it certainly avoids the excesses of production that Phil Spector made in previous works. However, the original pressings, in my opinion, were dull, but that's been remedied in the more recent box set of Lennon. As much as I also enjoyed Imagine and some of the other stuff, this is the one album that I've enjoyed the most of John Lennon. Number five.
Excellent. I've been looking at what I've actually purchased at the time, what I had in my collection, and what I've listened to over the years. Number five, we touched on this last week, Leo Sayer with Silverbird. That's one album that I purchased as soon as it came out back in 74. And it stuck with me. And the songs have grown in my estimation, given the fact that they weren't necessarily commercial songs. They were songs that you could grow with the more you listened to. Of course, it had The Show Must Go On, but there was so many good deeper cuts on that album that it was worth exploring and digging into. And over the years, it's just kept up in my estimation as being one of, worthy of my top five for 1974, Leo Sayer and Silverbird. All right, back to you, Martin, number four.
Okay, somebody who I came to fairly recently, actually, heard about the myth and the legend of Van Morrison for years. And then with a couple of other internet friends, we had a week listening to the first 12 or 16 albums that he put out. So 4 albums a day we would listen to, and we would discuss together over what we called our Astral Week. It was a pretty intense week. But the truth of it was, he was so consistently amazing from record to every record was different, but the depth and quality of his writing, and he changed so quickly from album to album. So, in recognition of his profound impact, I'm going to call Veed Fleece from Van Morrison.
Good selection, mate. He's obviously had another album out that year as well, as I recall.
Too Late to Stop Now. That was a live album. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
So one of my issues was that I would buy the best of collections of Van Morrison, and I would cherry pick 3 or 4 songs out of 12 that I would like, and the rest were just a bit too arcane. But when you're listening across album to album, it's a completely different experience, and recommend it.
Yep, cool. Awesome. Where's your number four?
My number 4 is Richard Harris.
Already our eyes are popping out, Wes. You predicted that.
Good. Look, I remember this recording from my early 20s when I was like all of us, searching for answers. And I came across Khalil Gibran's words, even though today they're probably not as deep as what they were to me at the time. But there's plenty of beauty and wisdom in there, especially with the wonderful reading voice of Richard Harris, one of the most unlikeliest recording stars towards the end of the 1960s, with the lush orchestration of, if I remember rightly, Arif Mardin. Richard Harris is, of course, the well-known actor, if you're not familiar with it, who moved across into pop with the #1 single in Australia, which is quite bizarre, more so than The Prophet, called There's Too Many Saviours on My Cross, which is talking about the situation in Ireland between the Orange and the Greens at that time. Then The Yard Went On Forever, and of course MacArthur Park, which he wrongly sings MacArthur's Park all the way through. But there it is. I've been through 2 copies of the album, and in the past 5 years, I've managed to track down a CD copy of it, which I paid $50 for. But these days, if you go to Amazon, you're looking at $128, $150 plus for this album of The Prophet, Richard Harris, with the poetry of Khalil Gibran.
Wow. I'm speechless, Wes. I didn't expect that. Sorry.
Oh, well, yeah, it's still coming, mate. There'll be more speechlessness.
Excellent. My number 4 is Hard Road by Stevie Wright. Now, we spoke glowingly about Evie parts 1, 2, and 3, and for that tumultuous single being on the album is enough to propel it into my top 5. It's got some other great songs. Obviously, the second single, Guitar Band, is on there as well. It's an excellent album, and I dare say we'll hear a little bit more about that album a bit later on, so I'll leave it at that. At number 4, Hard Road by Stevie Wright. Martin, number 3.
Number 3 is an album I bought by mistake. And this is what happens when you listen to the album show with John O'Donnell on Radio 3XY on a Sunday night, and you miss the title of what he's just played. All I know was that I heard this song, and he did describe it before he played it as the world's longest finale. So the first part of the song seemed to go for 1.5 minutes, and then like a 3.5 minute conclusion, as it was, you think it's going to finish and it didn't quite finish. And I'm like, that's amazing. Ran round to my record store the next day, and I'm like, well, now what could it have been? It was either Wishbone Ash, There's the Rub, or Stormbringer by Deep Purple. So I laid down my hard-earned cash and bought Stormbringer by Deep Purple, and it was the wrong album. And I found out later that it was There's the Rub by Wishbone Ash, but I did take home Stormbringer by Deep Purple, which was I think the last album before Richie Blackmore departed. It's the Mark III lineup with David Coverdale on lead vocals and Glenn Hughes on backing. Why Glenn Hughes was never a lead vocalist, I don't know, in it, and also playing bass. Richie Blackmore's last gasp before he departed, and Tommy Bolan came into the band. And in a way, you can tell that Richie is backing off and he's letting the other guys, the new guys, write the songs. It's a bit cruisier, it's a bit less immediate, a bit less vitality, shall we say. But I do remember my dad coming up to me and saying, that song, Soldier of Fortune, I really like that one. So bonding moment, where instead of me inheriting my dad's music, Glenn Campbell and Mamas and the Papas, my dad was returning the favour. He was taking music from me that he was liking and enjoying. So that's what that album means to me. It was a reconnection with my parents, where they were liking my music instead of me adopting their music.
Instead of you loving the Seekers, mate.
Yeah, I'd seen enough of the Seekers. I didn't need to look for them anymore.
Cool. Where's number 3?
From the archaeological wasteland of prog rock. And I've got this little nugget of musical fusion. It's number 3, Rick Wakeman, Journey to the Center of the Earth. It's one of those albums that rippled the fan base when it was originally released and remains a guilty pleasure to listen to again, particularly those who enjoy the Jules Verne book retold in musical form. There's a link there, I guess, to The Prophet. 50 years on, still able to engage new fans with its mix of orchestral and cutting-edge keyboard instruments. All the analog sounds mixed together and presented on the night without any programmable digital technology. Quite amazing. Wakeman, of course, proves the years spent in mastering the art of the synth was not wasted, and the mix of classical orchestra and rock band as developed by John Lord and Deep Purple certainly is still amazing. The orchestra, well, that gives a lot of depth to Rick's soaring keyboards, which enhance and reinforce the spoken narrative. I think the album still stands up after 50 years. And I'm going to say this, if you only have one prog rock concept album in your collection, this has got to be it.
Well,
What do you say?
I know that. Talk about baiting, right? We
all the way.
we will discuss this further.
Come on. And for those who are not sure what's going on, we often have conversations about the merits of prog rock and
King Crimson, yes, Genesis. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I've got to say, this is amazing.
Cool. Awesome. Well, back to the basics with my number 3. I've got to point out the Dingoes' first album.
Oh, yeah.
Self-titled Dingoes.
Yeah.
Last time we spoke, we talked about Let Go by Brian Catt. It's this country rock, Australian version of country rock that is extremely appealing. And I think the Dingoes probably didn't get as much recognition as they should have.
I agree.
Yeah.
Boy on the Run, Way Out West.
Yeah.
You know, it's like some of the Way Out West, some of the poetry is a little bit forced, I think, but it's like, mate, I want to hear 3 or 4 or 5 albums deep. You know, where are they going to go? Where could this develop to? Because the seeds of that were so strong, and again, as we've said about Leo Sayer and about others, so heartfelt, so poignant.
Again, it's kind of like, remember with another Mushroom Act, the Dingoes, and they were Broderick Smith, lead singer, and I think others took the lead at different times.
Karen Tolhurst,
yes,
Rattling Sabres, who wrote All Fired Up to Pat Benatar, made a big international hit later.
They did some amazing stuff, keeping in mind that Broderick was doing the blues stuff beforehand with Carson.
Yeah.
And then they make this and they shift off to the USA. And it was kind of like presenting Coles to Newcastle, so to speak. So the songs were really strong for that period of time. However, Mushroom was, even in those early times, really keen to get the music of Australian musicians on an international platform. This was one that I suspect failed, but still, what an incredible legacy that Rod and the other members of the group have left us. And, you know, like there've been even those, the duet with James Rain, just amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good choice. And Dingoes, just one of the most important acts in Australian music history.
Okay, so that's number 3 for me. Number 2, Martin.
Again, harking back to the album show with John O'Donnell and hearing Lou Reed for the first time. He was about to tour Australia. Walk on the Wild Side hadn't entered the public consciousness yet, and John was playing album tracks from a new record, live record that Lou had out called Rock and Roll Animal, featuring 2 pretty wild guitar players. One was Steve Hunter and the other one was Dick Wagner. And the interesting thing was, it wasn't that one was the lead guitarist and one was the rhythm guitarist, like the rock and roll stereotype. Particularly for Sweet Jane, they had like an extended instrumental introduction. And one would play a line and the other one would play a counterpoint or a counter melody to it, and they would weave around each other. Very orchestral kind of thinking. And to my, teenage mind, I would have been 13, I guess, at the time. This was just the most amazing thing I'd ever heard. And coming back to it in recent years, it's a little bit corny, but for the time, absolutely groundbreaking. Of course, Lou had this ability to write lyrics that were just the dark underbelly of society. And, some of the songs, rock and roll, for example, just enjoying listening to the radio and just the benefits of a really clued in radio programmer who could make your life come alive by putting songs on that just lifted your spirit. So I could relate to that, certainly. Amazing record. Rock and Roll Animal by Lou Reed.
How about you, Wes? Number 2?
In the 70s, Jeannie Lewis sang numerous styles: folk, jazz, Latin, blues, opera, rock, fusion. That's probably one of the reasons why I loved the music. She also studied with Myra Lambert, who was also my singing teacher at the Con. So we've got a connection there. Among her output was Peter Sculthorpe's Love 200, a classical type work or a fusion work featuring Tully, the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and her. Now, Tully released a live version of it and Jeannie singing The Stars Turn, which is amazing. Now, even better is an ABC house recording, which you can't get your hands on, but it's so much better than the live cut. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is that Jeannie loved performing live. And looking back to Tomorrow In and Out of Concert was released and performed, I think, in 1974 at the State Theatre in Sydney. It's what I regard as a mesmerizing concert featuring songs by Ray Davies like Celluloid Heroes, Dory Previns, Scared to Be Alone's Stephen Sondheim, and the Reverend Gary Davies, Cocaine Blues, not a religious song at all. I've worn several vinyl copies of that out, which I still play. Unfortunately, I don't have a CD copy of it, and nothing is available on iTunes, but some of the tracks are available on CD on a compilation project called Classical Tracks. But I have no trouble playing the very crackly vinyl, which I love and play regularly. Jeannie Lewis, number 2, Looking Backwards to Tomorrow.
That begs the question, how do we get our filthy hands on listening to that? Because you've got me intrigued, Wes.
Well,
it's very hard unless you do a rip of it or something like that of the vinyl. And
well, that might be the only way we can do it.
Yeah, because you've got me wanting to have a listen.
You're going to love it if you get your hands on it. I tell you, look, every now and then you'll see it at a second-hand shop, but again, they're going to ask you for dough.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Good dough, and they realise that it's a rarity, and recognise just the wonderful skill in it. A lot of the musicians that have played on it were part of Superstar, and which was all happening at that time too. So it's just probably one of the best albums that came out by Aussies at that time.
Nice. My number two, guys, another album that I actually purchased not long after it came out. It's by an English band called Mott the Hoople, and the album's called The Hoople, and it's an excellent, it's right down my alley as far as rock and roll goes. I guess a lot of people put them into the glam rock aspect. I guess I can see that, but it's Ian Hunter's voice is at its best in 1974, and that album just produces one great song after another. And if you manage to get your hands on that one, even stream it, it's well worth it if you enjoy good rock and roll and excellent, tasteful guitar playing, as well as excellent vocals from Ian Hunter as well.
So if Leo Sayer had the pathos, I think you could say Ian Hunter had the sarcasm and the wits. Every song had a slice of life, like Leo Sayer, but he was taking the mickey out of himself or out of the band or out of the situation that the band would find themselves in. A bit of biography, not necessarily autobiography, but a bit of humanity in it, and that streetwise humour.
Yes. And combined with some great rock and roll.
Yeah.
Mott the Hoople weren't all that popular, but their songs were so appealing. It's one of those bands that you're thinking should have had a lot more hits than they did. Other glam rock bands, I guess, got the limelight, and Ian Hunter was left, and his band were fermenting in a sense.
You put them next to Sweet and Slade, and they would fit right there, as far as I'm concerned. Just catchy songs. If you're up for a good time, those songs were just great.
Yeah. Worthy of exploring, especially the Hoople and Mott, as far as Mott the Hoople are concerned. And of course, Ian Hunter went on to a successful solo career, and probably one of my all-time favourite albums was his first solo album, which you might recall the single that came off that one.
Once Bitten, Twice Shy.
Correct.
Great song. Great song.
So that was my number two, The Hoople by Mott the Hoople.
Yep.
Before we get to our number one, boys, how about some honourable?
Sure. Of course, it will be remiss of any discussion of albums from 74 not to talk about Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, which had just some amazing songs. And I did have the single Saturday Night, It's All Right for Fighting, back in the day. Of course, Candle in the Wind, title track, Love Lies Bleeding. But I had a look at the track list, and once you get past side one, and then there's one song on side two, and then there's another song on side four, and there's a whole bunch of songs on side 2, 3, and 4 that I just don't know at all. So I'm like, well, I can't really include that in my personal best. One of the interesting things is the song itself, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. So let me just consult my notes here. That Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was recorded in late 73 and released in early 70. Sorry, no, released in October 73. When I checked in on Tangerine Dream and their album Phaedra, which was released in 74, there's a track on side 2 of that kind of mimics the chords and part of the melody of that. And it's kind of irritating because from Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, that melody so well, and this Tangerine Dream instrumental track doesn't quite play it exactly the same, and it's very, very close. And I've never heard that melody, as far as I know, anywhere else. So the Tangerine Dream record came out in early 74, recorded a month after Goodbye Yellow Brick Road came out. So I'm not saying that they nicked it or that they were influenced, but who knows? And if you ever run into Edgar Froese in the street, you can ask him. But I think that's probably very unlikely. And what else? Eric Clapton, 461 Ocean Boulevard, William Hand Jive was great, and Motherless Children was great. I Shot the Sheriff, which was, for many of us in Australia, our first taste of Bob Marley track via a cover. Very good. Yeah, I think that's about it from my copious list. Oh, the other thing to note, Rocktober in 1974. Three English hard rock bands came out: Uriah Heep, Status Quo, and Black Sabbath, all within 3 weeks of each other. And in fact, on one weekend, and I'm not sure which one it was, but two of the bands were playing at Festival Hall in Melbourne within a couple of days of each other. So that was my first taste of Rocktober.
Which was a promotion for 2SM, for 3XY, some other radio stations.
However, these bands never got airplay on these radio stations for their latest songs. So I'm like, what are you doing? You know, you're promoting the concerts, but you're not actually playing their latest singles. I never understood that.
What about some honourables from you, Wes?
Go back to 1974, which is the year we're looking at. And the first thing I go as an honourable mention is the history of Chain.
Yeah.
Like Judgment and Black and Blue, and it was a double album, I think, that came out. And I just loved Chain back in the day. Loved Black and Blue. And I knew that was a compilation, but that was probably one of the best-selling compilations by an Aussie act, without having to go into 1974 explosive hits and that sort of stuff. Totally loved that. And I think the very first Chain album, Towards the Blues, took 24 years for that to go gold. So 24 years to sell 35,000 copies. So that was a testament to Festival Records.
Perseverance,
and they eventually got it. But Chain
did they recoup their budget?
Well, they might have by that stage. And the band was initially called The Chain, and Wendy Saddington was the lead singer in the group, and of course went on with other people. But History of Chain, another compilation which I didn't realise until this past week was a compilation project, and that was Greg Quill's Country Radio and the Gypsy Queen. I was familiar with the live album, but I guess this was a compilation of the singles as well. And the single that I found most outstanding was Winter Song, which came out in 1972, so that predates this, but this album came out in 74. Maybe one other, and this is probably a strange one, featuring Alvin Lee and Mylan Lefevre.
Oh, yes.
And the album's called On the Road to Freedom. It's kind of like a weird thing. Alvin Lee, of course, from 10 Years After. Features George Harrison and a pile of other UK performers, and they somehow made contact with Mylan Lefevre, who is a gospel singer out of the US. And he came over and did some work, made this record, and then went home again. But there's nothing gospelly about this record. It's bluesy. There's a little bit of pop. Some of it is stunning, and some of it's boring. But it's still, I've got to put there as one of my also-rans.
Yeah, I remember you playing this record for me, and my understanding of Alvin Lee was via Woodstock. When he was part of 10 Years After, he was known for his blazingly fast, raucous guitar playing, and yet this album is more country rock or more laid back than that one. So I was very surprised that it was really different than I was expecting from the stereotype.
Yeah, particularly George Harrison's involvement.
Yeah, well.
So, which he did, of course, under another name.
Right. My honourables, I'd like to start off with an Aussie, you might say it's a prog rock band, one that I didn't explore at the time because I wasn't into prog rock at all, but I've subsequently picked up the CD. It's Madder Lake and Butterfly Farm. This is an excellent record or CD. They're worthy of having a listen to even today. They sound great. Courtesy of a mob called Aztec Music. It's where I pick up a lot of older Aussie stuff that you can't really get anywhere else. And they've released a number of Aussie albums that I've picked up. I don't know if you guys know too much about Aztec Music. I know very little, but I'm enjoying some good music out of it.
Yeah, this was one of the 2 early albums that were put out by Mushroom. And Meadowlake was one of the first bands to, and I think they opened the very first Sunbury Festival and then went on to play at all of the Sunbury festivals that ensued over the following years. Meadowlake, Goodbye Lollipop, the single that you mentioned, just highly regarded, and they still perform today.
Oh, right.
Hey, wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really appreciative of what's come out through that. You might call it a label, I guess, Aztec Music, but
he's done a good job. Gil Matthews, of course, a member at one stage of the Aztecs, which hence the label. And so a lot of Billy Thorpe's material has seen the light of day, and some of the compilation or hit singles, I guess, from Havoc have also been out as well, if I've got that right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, that was another one that I've picked up through Aztec Music, and that was from 1974, I believe. More Arse Than Class by Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs.
Yeah.
Good album, yeah.
And good concerts too.
Yeah, right, okay.
Like there's the streaming of the Sydney Opera House, for example. Then there's the other one of Thorpe, which is at the Melbourne Town Hall, where for whatever reason they were able to get permission to play the organ of the Melbourne Town Hall, and that just blew everybody away.
Wow.
And blew up the organist, from what I understand.
Yeah. Well, it lit up the crowd.
Yeah, right. Cool.
But Meadowlake, I love them. Good choice.
Yeah, yeah. And also, Martin mentioned Stormbringer earlier on. What about Burn, Martin? Have you?
Yeah, same, yeah. Well, yeah, I'm not familiar with the deep cuts on that one. So Lay Down, Stay Down, or Might Just Take Your Life. Don't really, I couldn't whistle those tunes to you at all. But the title track, what a killer! They were on fire.
They were on fire. Like their title track. Some of their title tracks are absolutely amazing. Burn is one.
Yeah. In a way, I wish I bought that one instead of Stormbringer. But a bit more vitality, and as I say, Richie Blackmore was probably a bit more interested, involved, integrated. Yeah.
Another one you mentioned, Martin, was Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Elton John also released Caribou in 1974. And I think this one's starting to get a bit of traction after many years. People are recognizing this album with songs like Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me and The Bitch Is Back.
I hated Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me when it came out. And it's one of those songs that as you grow older or you mature, you appreciate things that you thought were terrible. You understand are actually beautiful and heartfelt and incredibly well composed and written and put together. So, yeah, it changed my mind on that one.
And of course, just like to highlight, last of all, another huge act, Queen with Sheer Heart Attack. That was my first glimpse into Queen when with Killer Queen when that.
Yeah. I remember being at the local record store, looking through the singles, and the record company rep was there talking to the record buyer, and I overheard the conversation, and he said, "You need to stock up on this one. It's going to be big." And that was Killer Queen from Sheer Heart Attack. And I'm like, how does he know? How does he know it's going to be big until it sells? What's going on? He knows something that I don't know because I haven't bought it yet.
Yep, he was spot on. All right, let's get into our number one. Martin, starting with you.
Yeah, so again, this is a record I heard on the album show. I was very influenced by that album show on Sunday nights. And might have been the second LP record I ever bought. I remember going over to the new department store that had just opened across the road and putting it on lay-by and paying it off 40 cents a week. And by the third week, I couldn't wait any longer, and I went in and paid the rest and brought it home. It's Relayer by Yes.
Wow.
And Yes, without Rick Wakeman. Rick Wakeman had departed to make Journey to the Centre of the Earth and King Arthur and so forth. And this record, probably the most played record I've ever had in my life. And I used to take it along to church youth group on Saturday nights. And, if we'd have social nights, I'd bring along a record player and I'd put this on, and I could clear a room in seconds with this record. It was amazing. And I had no idea that what tickled my ears was offensive to anybody else's ears. But there you go. It took me a while to figure that out. And
they just wanted Susie Quattro, mate.
Well, yeah. Devilgate Drive at the church picnic. Yeah, that would have been great. But three songs. One song on the first side called "The Gates of Delirium," based on Tolstoy's War and Peace. It's like, yeah, no wonder you needed a whole record to make that one. And then their one and only foray into jazz rock on side two, which was called Sound Chaser. So they're trying to do English white boys trying to do Weather Report. And I'm like, they're not jazz guys at all, but they were trying. And then just this exquisite ballad called "To Be Over" to conclude the record. And I loved it then, and I love it now, 50 years later. Relayer by Yes.
Wow. I forgot about that one. I was thinking something else was going to crop up. What's your number one?
Well, you've already alluded to it. And it was my number one single last week when we were referring to Evie parts 1, 2, and 3. This is Stevie Wright's Hard Road. Rod Stewart did a cover of the title track, which is pretty average, but it's okay.
No, it's terrible. It was terrible.
I'm trying to be polite, Martin.
Rod was an extraordinary interpreter of other people's songs, but in that case, I'll make an exception.
Yeah, it was back to Stevie Wright. That was one of the best-selling albums of the year. Peaked at number 2 on the charts at that time. And to my mind, it put Stevie and the former Easy Beats that played on that, along with some people that eventually become part of AC/DC. Well, in the case of Stevie and the former Easy Beats, that was the height of their success in the post-Easy Beat era as performers. But as songwriters, of course, Vander and Young went on to do some amazing stuff afterwards.
Cool. Good.
Hard Road.
Yeah.
Come on, let's play the 13 minutes now.
My number one, Martin alluded to it in his top 5 last time with the singles. And that was, I didn't have it in my top 5, the single, but I've got the album as a whole as my number one album for the year. And I think it was, once again, purchased it as soon as it came out. And that's Living in the 70s by Skyhooks. I think that is a magnificent testament to creativity, great songwriting, innovation. You mentioned it all last time when you mentioned the singles, Martin, the single Living in the 70s. It's got everything, that album. It's a slice of life, and it mainly centers around Melbourne and the suburbs around there. But it certainly packs a punch, and it's still there today, in my opinion. It's fantastic. It gives you a glimpse of what life was like back in Melbourne, back in the mid-70s. And to me, I can continually bring it up and listen to it and really enjoy it.
The thing was,
go.
nobody sounded like Skyhooks.
Yeah.
And right. And again, going back to the Lou Reed rock and roll animal thing, where you didn't have the dichotomy or you didn't have the situation where one guy's playing the rhythm and the other guy's playing lead guitar over the top. With Skyhooks, they're playing single note lines that kind of weaved around each other. And I wonder how much of that had to do with the fact that the songs were written by the bass player, whether he was sitting with his bass at home. I'm not sure. Maybe he did it that way, or maybe he played guitar normally as well. But it was such a different way of having basically a rock and roll band who weren't playing boogie style rock and roll. And they were very theatrical, and I'm assuming inspired somewhat by like Sensational Alex Harvey Band with their clown makeup and the theatre and aspect of it. But yeah, the visual presentation, Greg McCain's lyrics, and just the really intriguing arrangements just made them not sound like anybody else.
The thing I want to highlight on that is one of the things that didn't make them sound like anybody else was these were a group of people who were talking about Australia. Now, you alluded to it when you were talking about Melbourne, but these were songs about growing up here. It wasn't talking about growing up in California or London or Ireland.
Yeah.
This was about Aussie. This was about the suburbs of Melbourne. And that sort of thing hadn't been done in rock music before. Like it'd been done with people like Gary Shearston, Lucky Starr, Rolf Harris, the Wesley Three, and Idlers Five, which was basically folk. I don't know what you'd do, describe Rolf as, but in terms of the other, this was monumental to hear about what life was like growing up.
Let's not underrate Shirley Strawn's input into this band. His interpreting of the wonderful lyrics is incredible. He just knew how to deliver a tune, a lyric. And as far as I'm concerned, it really played a part in my enjoyment of the album and continues to do so.
Yeah. He was a good showman, eh?
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't there another lead singer or something with Skyhooks before Shirley?
There was Steve Hill, and Bob Starkey's brother was the main guitarist, and they played at Sunbury, and Steve Hill was so disappointed by his performance at Sunbury that he quit, and that paved the way for Shirley to be invited into the band, and Peter Starkey relinquished his role to his younger brother, Bob. And Skyhooks, as we know it, then recorded Living in the 70s.
Yeah.
I want to tell you a story of I landed in a commercial radio station, which was part of my job. And I went, why are half the tracks cut? With those knives, they're literally slit. And I'm going, why are these all cut? I can't play them.
Yeah.
And I'm going, oh, yeah, I know. These are six tracks from the album were banned from commercial airplay back in the day. The ABC could play it, but not commercial radio.
Preemptive measures. Yeah.
And so what they did is to make sure there were no mistakes, bang, they're going to slit them down with the little knife. And that was common. So if you want to know if there's, for any record that was banned.
Wow.
Sliced.
Slashed.
Yeah.
Slashed. Slice and dice.
Yeah.
Oh man, unbelievable. And that's what you mentioned last time, I think, Martin. Where's you did when we're talking about the singles. You mentioned that the first song that Double J played was "You Just Like Me Because I'm Good in Bed."
Yeah.
The opening track. Obviously, that was one of the Slice Arenos that.
Yep. It's, I mean, what? Hey, and there are two, right. Do you remember the period of time in the early 80s when everyone was doing hooked on everything? Well, Skyhooks did hooked on hooks.
Yeah.
They made two versions of it.
Oh,
Truly, one had, in other words, the stock copy was the version that had "You Just Like Me" in there. And then there was a radio mix which had that missing from it. Still in the 80s, they weren't playing it. But then again, you're talking about Eagle's Life in the Fast Lane, and that's got a reference to that same thing in that song.
All right.
So someone let that through.
yeah.
Didn't let Skyhooks through, and we're only talking here about 2 or 3 years apart.
Oh man, conversations with music directors at radio stations are just fraught at the best of times.
Well, they will, like, in promoting various songs to different people, a radio program will say to me, "Oh, no, look, we're not going to play it. It sounds like everything else we're playing."
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like it's a good fit. And then they'll say, "Oh, the same song. Oh, it doesn't sound like anything else we're playing."
So we can't play. Yeah. So we can play it and we can't play it for the same reason.
Yeah, look, it's all BS, you know that.
Yeah.
Well, that's it, boys. Anything else to add for 1974?
Great year, amazing year for records,
Absolutely.
and the early 70s in particular, 72, 3, 4, 5, amazing stuff.
Next time we meet, we'll look at the 80s, 1984 to be exact, 40 years ago. So have a think about that, do a bit of research, a bit of storytelling, and we'll look at the singles first, like we did with 74, and then we'll look at the albums. So looking forward to that.
Indeed.
We're in totally
See what you think about the 80s, mate.
Yeah, exactly. I feel a rant coming on, so look out for that. All right. Well, catch up, boys. We'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Well done today.
Cheers, mate.